The Korg Legacy Collection contains 20 software instruments. Do you need them all? Particularly, do you need them all to get the flavour of Korg instruments over the decades? I shall try to answer that question in this video. Now, I bought the Korg Legacy Collection version 6 last Black Friday. It took me a while to get around to actually pulling the trigger. I love Korg instruments, but if you want to know why, and if you want to know if I think I got a good deal or not, check out the link in the description. So, the Legacy Collection obviously contains 20 software instruments by Korg, unlike, for example, Arturia's V Collection, which contains lots and lots of different instruments from different companies. And I was wondering, while I've been playing with the Legacy Collection, how much of an overlap there is between instruments. Let's find out, and let's see if you agree with me. Let's start with the Workstations, and what better place to start than with the M1. And even if you haven't owned one or seen one, you have absolutely heard one, and you're probably familiar with it. It was released in 1988, and it was possibly one of the first workstations, one of the first instruments to get the name workstation. It featured a PCM synthesizer, it was multi-timbral, it had effects, it had a sequencer, so you could actually use this to create entire tracks. It was released around the time when the word workstation was gaining more popular use. Although it is possibly one of the most famous instruments in history, it is famous for particular sounds, in particular the Universe sound and Piano 16, which featured on, it must be, thousands of records. Here's what they sound like in case you need a refresher. It was a little bit quirky, very characterful, very iconic, terrible interface, but it was historically very significant. If we move up the ladder, historically speaking, to 1995, we come to the Trinity. We'll come on to the Triton in a moment, but the Trinity was a sort of transitional workstation. Interestingly, the Trinity includes the M1 factory sound set. I am indebted to my friend Matt Wright of Matt Wright Music for pointing this out. He made a video about it. Link in the description. Go and check it out. Now, it only includes the factory set. It doesn't include all the M1 factory cards, which I believe the M1 soft synth does. So if you like the M1, that is one reason to get the M1 synth. But if you just want the flavour of the M1, then the Trinity will do that job for you. Now, the Trinity has its own engine. It's essentially the same sort of thing as the M1, but it's doing its own thing. So different engine, slightly different results. It does not, as far as I'm aware, have any universally recognised sounds. It was good at lots of things, particularly choirs and strings and pads, and it had pianos as well. So in terms of workstation evolution, Trinity sort of brought everything together at that time. A few years later, the Triton was released, but we're going to skip right over that and jump to 2004, 2005, when the Triton Extreme was released. This is a superset of the Triton. If you have the Extreme, you don't need the Triton at all. So this was the end, or culmination, if you like, of this workstation era. And it encapsulated everything that the M1 and the Trinity and the original Triton were trying to do. It has massive RAM and a lot of sounds. The Triton Extreme doesn't just replace one instrument, it replaces several. And around this time, this is when workstations became very popular as an all-in-one instrument. Let's jump back a few years to 1990 to Korg's Workstation. This was a bit of a left field, left turn for Korg because it doesn't fit neatly into any of Korg's other instrument categories. It was about wave sequencing, not layering sounds. This movement was a part of the sound. It's a different way of thinking. It's not necessarily better than what's gone before or what came after. It's just different. So if you are looking for unique instruments in the collection, this one is an absolute keeper. Let's now have a look at the analog synthesizers, and what better place to start than with the PS3300, which made an appearance in 1977. Now, interestingly, Korg previewed a sort of re-release at some of the synth shows over the last year, and as far as I can make out, it was a sort of proof of concept to see if they could actually recreate it, which they did, according to the show reports. And it was supposed to be available only to special order. And I only saw one Korg employee venture a price when absolutely pushed by the interviewer, and that was 13.5 grand. Now, I'm not sure if that was dollars or pounds, probably dollars, so it was a lot of money. But this was, and is, if it comes to fruition, an absolutely massive synthesizer. It is analog and totally polyphonic. It is a huge polyphonic ensemble synth, and there is nothing else in the collection, and possibly outside the collection, which behaves in the same way. We'll jump a year ahead to 1978 and to one of Korg's and history's most iconic synthesizers, the MS-20. It looks like something from the future, a spaceship control panel. At least it did back in the 70s. Its filters are often called aggressive, and the sound is sometimes referred to as gritty or dirty or aggressive. It has bags of character, and it is semi-modular. And it is essentially one knob per function, so it is relatively easy to get in there and tweak the settings. I've heard one person refer to it as, it's not a synth you play, it's a synth you wrestle with. I think that might be a bit extreme, but it is certainly an instrument which I think deserves its place in the Korg collection, for historic reasons if nothing else. So, talking of semi-modular analog synthesizers, we'll move on to the ARP 2600. Now, this was not Korg's original design, it was designed by ARP, but Korg re-released a physical version of it several years ago, and now we have a software version. Like the MS-20, it is semi-modular, but you would struggle to find two synths which are so different. This is more sound design focused. You can get inside of it and create all sorts of wonderful sounds. And it has a very broad range. At this point, it is definitely worth mentioning the ARP Odyssey. The original was released in 1972. As you can tell from the look and the name, it is a sort of subset of the 2600, so there's probably not much you can do with the Odyssey that you can't do with the 2600. However, it is essentially one knob per function, so in terms of ease of use, it definitely beats the 2600, although if you have the 2600, you probably don't need the Odyssey. So what about the Poly 6? This came out initially in 1981. It's a very sweet synthesizer, particularly with its chorus effect. Very forgiving, very musical, very easy to use. Nice to have, but in terms of differentiation, there's not a lot about it to differentiate it from a lot of the other instruments in the collection. If you ever had one, you probably have a very soft spot for it. The Mono Poly was released in 1981, a paraphonic instrument. It has a lot of character, but sonically it's not so different from many of the other instruments we've mentioned. It is perhaps a little bit more edgy than the Poly 6. In 1974, I know we're jumping around historically a little bit, but in 1974 Korg released the Mini Korg 700S. It was an early mono synth and basically overlapped a lot of the functionality of the MS-20. Korg recently revamped it and updated it a couple of years ago. I really don't know why, but somebody somewhere probably wanted one. In 1995, Korg released The Prophecy. This was technically very interesting. It was quite complex and forward-looking for the time. Now, you probably want to play with it, but within the collection, many of the things it does are also done by some of the other instruments. The MS-20, the gritty sound, the lead sounds and bass sounds it can produce, the ARP Odyssey, the ARP 2600. But if you're trying to fill any gaps in your music arsenal, they are probably covered by other instruments. I know someone in the comments is going to say, no, they're not. That's fine. I'm just pointing out that there is a bit of a sonic overlap with some of the other instruments. So what have we got left? There's the Micro Korg, which I think this was released in the early 2000s. Very individual, very affordable if you want the hardware version. Very easy to use. It featured on a lot of records for all those reasons, but sonically there's not much there that makes it stand out from what we've already seen. There's also the Electribe, which is a sort of pattern-based drum machine thingy. I confess I have not got very far into this. The sound just doesn't appeal to me, but it's more about patterns and drum programming than synthesis. There's the Chaos Pad, released in 1999, a sort of gestural performance effects unit, very Korg. Now we come to the pianos. There's the XGX1, a sample piano, and the EP1, an electric piano. There's also the Vox Continental organ. I'm going to group these together. They are individual to the collection, yes, but as instruments, they don't stand out particularly from a mass of other instruments from other companies. So if you have no other plugins, then you might find these useful, but you probably have piano plugins, and I never liked the Vox Continental organ anyway. If you do like transistor organs, there's one here. So that's basically a rundown of what you get in the Korg Legacy Collection Volume 6. It's not 20 different ideas, it's a collection of a small number of core ideas, of variations, and, of course, history. So if you want to condense these into essential instruments that will give you the flavour of Korg and Korg design over the decades, I would say the core instruments are the M1, as it was one of the originators of the workstation format, and also, of course, because some of its iconic sounds. The Triton Extreme showed that workstations had finally grown up and come of age. The Wavestation was not an apple that fell very close to the tree. It was Korg trying something a little bit different, and different it certainly is, and I think it well deserves a place in the collection for that reason. The PS 3300, what can I say? It's almost worth buying the entire collection just to get this one synth. You can buy it individually if you want to. I'm going to say more about that in a minute. And finally, last but by no means least, the MS-20 and the ARP 2600. Semi-modular, lots of character, lots of flexibility, very specific individual sounding synthesizers. Everything else adds a slightly different flavour. They may offer a slightly different workflow, but of course they also pinpoint markers in Korg's design and historical synthesizer evolution. Now, having gone through all this and condensed the entire Korg collection down to a handful of instruments, you might be thinking, well, I could just buy those. I don't need the entire collection. That is probably true, but there is a little bit of a gotcha. If you look at the prices, I'm not going to delve into them here. Korg usually has sales at regular times throughout the year, and you'll get a 50% discount off the headline rate. But if you look at the prices of the individual instruments and the price of the bundle, it's really not worth buying any of the individual ones. That's the way it is with digital products. Companies would rather get a bit more money out of you and give you everything because it doesn't cost them that much more than if you just bought one product. So what's the takeaway then if you're going to have to buy the whole bundle anyway? Well, the takeaway is you don't necessarily need to install all the instruments to get the Korg flavour, certainly. I haven't installed the pianos, the tritone, the organ, or some of the other little fillers. I'm just not going to use them. So you will save yourself a lot of time and effort probably by sticking to the core instruments. Now, I'm not saying the other ones are not worth having. They absolutely are. But if you're looking for particular types of Korg sounds, then those instruments which I mentioned will give you the core sound without having to go through every single one of the other instruments. That's just my take. Let me know what you think. Have you got the Korg collection? What is your favourite instrument or instruments? Do let me know in the comments. And of course, let me know if you think I'm way off base with my analysis of this. Comments are there for discussion. In any event, I hope you found this interesting. If you did, maybe you'd like to consider subscribing to the channel, ringing the bell. Thank you. So you get informed of new videos as soon as I release them. There's a whole range of different stuff about synthesizers and plugins and electronic music and all that sort of lovely stuff. As always, I really do appreciate you watching. Thank you so much indeed. I will see you in the next one.